The Hilton sale is on. Now through September 29th, you can save up to 20% on stays this fall and beyond. Long weekends, last-minute getaways, holiday gatherings. There's a Hilton stay for all of them. More moments, more experiences, more destinations. Now 20% off for a limited time because it matters where you stay. Don't wait. Book by September 29th and save up to 20% at Hilton.com. Terms apply. Hilton for the stay.
Hey business owners, we know you know the importance of maximizing every dollar. With the Delta SkyMiles Reserve Business American Express card, you can make your expenses work just as hard as you. From afternoon coffee runs to stocking office supplies and even team dinners, you can earn miles on all your business expenses. Plus, you can earn 125,000 bonus miles for a limited time through October 29th. The Delta SkyMiles Reserve Business Card. If you travel, you know. Minimum spending requirements and terms apply. Offer ends October 29th, 2025.
Hi, and welcome to Deep Leadership. I'm your host, John Rennie. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Britt Yamamoto. He's an educator, entrepreneur, and author who connects agricultural wisdom with leadership. Drawing on his experiences farming in Japan and California, he developed the concept of soil-based leadership, which is the idea that leaders must cultivate the right conditions for employee growth, transformation, and well-being. Now, this is a unique way to look at leadership that'll help you become an even better leader. I love this conversation. I know you will as well. So, are you ready to dive in? Let's get started.
Welcome to Deep Leadership, the show built on one simple and powerful truth. Leadership is a people business. If you're ready to become a better boss and a stronger leader, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Today, I'm joined by Dr. Britt Yamamoto. Britt is an educator, entrepreneur, and author whose work weaves together agricultural wisdom, cultural roots, and a global perspective. He is a fourth-generation Japanese American, and his outlook is shaped by seasons spent farming in Japan and California, where he came to see that many of life's essential truths, patience, care, adaptability, are found in the soil. He is the entrepreneur behind perennial and root spring initiatives that invite people to move through the world with greater purpose, presence, and awareness. His books, The Soil of Leadership and the Hyaksho Way, offer a grounded path for those drawn to live more expansively, attuned to the rhythm of the land, culture, and self. A Fulbright scholar with a PhD in geography, Britt is also a clinical associate professor at the University of Washington, where he has spent more than 2 decades designing spaces for reflection, connection, and leadership learning across continents and communities. And I'm excited to have him on the show to learn more from his unique perspective. So, Britt, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, John. Glad
it's good to meet you. And I messed up on the name of your second book. I knew I would, and I apologize. So, tell us what the right pronunciation for your second book is.
We would say the Hyaksho Way.
Hyaksho Way. All right. Yeah, so very good. I love it. And it's an honor to meet you. And again, one of the purposes of this podcast is to give people different perspectives on leadership. And your perspective, when I read about what you do, is completely unique, completely different. So let's just get started with that. So what makes your perspective unique about leadership, and how does it, where did you kind of develop some of these thoughts and ideas about leadership?
Yeah, well, thanks for the question. So maybe I'll start with just a story. And this story really informs where all of that came from. So despite the fact that farming really has informed my approach to leadership for so long now, I did not grow up with agriculture as a very present part of my life. As a fourth generation Japanese American, my grandparents were farmers, but as many grandparents wish for their children, if certainly their grandchildren, they seek for them to move off the farm, and to certainly when it comes to small truck farming kinds of operations. And so farming was not something that was encouraged in the household to go on and become a farmer. So it wasn't until I was a young adult where at that time I was very clear that I wanted to be an educator, but the way I was going to do that was through connecting people to ecological systems, to the land, and so on. But I realized that I knew very little about one of the fundamental parts about how we relate to our natural surroundings, and that's how we produce and consume our food. So that was really what led me to want to learn about farming. And of course, that led me down a long path, learning more about my family's history as well. But what that really initiated was a trip to Japan, where I had really never visited, although I was actually born there. My parents were working for the U.S. military on an Air Force base, Tachikawa Air Force Base, just outside Tokyo. And so I was born there. I was only there for a few months before they returned to the U.S. So when I traveled there in my early 20s, it was both the second time that I had been there, but really the first time for me in terms of a real a personal act. So I made the trip, found this farm that I could live and work and learn at. And this was not in like the Tokyo area. This was in the southern part of Japan. So it took me quite a while to get there from at that time where I was living, California. And I arrived very, very early in the morning, probably about 3 a.m. at this farm. So I couldn't see where I was and was asked, was told that I needed to wake up at 5 o'clock to get ready for the day. And didn't sleep at all, of course, just fueled with adrenaline and, kind of blurry with jet lag and so on. So I woke up that next morning and the main farmer greeted me. And the first thing we did was we walked out into the fields. And this was October in Japan, where everything is just bursting with color and blooming and insects everywhere and smells and tastes and so on. So we walked out in the middle of this field, and I was just taking all of it in, and had prepared, of course, knowing that I was going to this sustainable farm where they were applying more traditional farming practices and so on. So I had done some studying, even though I had no knowledge of farming. And the farmer asked me this question on this very first moment on the farm in the field. And he said, "Britt-san, what's the difference between a conventional farmer and a sustainable farmer? What's the difference between a conventional farmer and a sustainable farmer?" And so, of course, I had all of the answers because I'd studied, so to speak. I'd read the articles in the books, and this was in the 90s, so I wasn't so much Googling and certainly not asking like ChatGPT to give me all of the answers. But, I had one uses chemicals, one's focused on the community, blah, 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 all of the stuff, right? And this is coming also from, mind you, a very righteous, early 20-year-old person too, right?
Right.
So, very kind man, let me finish, and said, "Well, all those things may be true, but what you need to know is this, that a conventional farmer grows plants and a sustainable farmer grows soil." And very simple, very profound, and very helpful in terms of how you think about farming and what you're doing. And so if you're farming in a more traditional, sustainable way, you need to be thinking about not just what you're planting, but also what you're thinking about planting next and season after season, right? So you understand that soil-based proposition is more about the conditions in which you are creating for plants to grow, right? Whereas plants, you're focused on what you can see above the surface and so on. Soil is very much like a root proposition, right? It's what's beneath the surface. It's it's a different orientation to time. And so again, this was a very helpful framing for me to farm, which I would go on to do for another 6 years. But it wasn't until actually I would go on to actually found some organizations, also begin to teach leadership in my own context, that I actually realized that the framing was equally as profound in the workplace, in organizational life.
Yeah.
Where, what does it mean for us to think differently about the contexts that we are cultivating, right? The conditions. How do we cultivate the conditions for growth and transformation as opposed to what are we planting, right? And if you think about often management practices are very much a plant-based proposition, right? It's thinking about what you can plant, what you can harvest, and what you can turn over. And it often loses sight, often at the expense of the cost and extraction from the soil, so to speak, right? The context in which people are working in. And this is not to say that it's an either or proposition at all, right? You can't be a farmer and just grow soil.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when you lose sight of that, and if you're focused on just extraction and production, at some point, there's going to be a bit of a reckoning where you're not going to be able to grow anymore. Unless, of course, you're adding all of these inputs and all these other things, right? That sort of prop up the growing proposition. And again, I think we can point and see a lot of those things that happen in the workplace too, where a lot of the interventions, they're very short-lived, and they come at they come without a real attention to how these things will be integrated in the long term. So my approach, to get to your question, and what makes it unique, is that in our work, we really try to advance what we call a soil-based leadership, which is really asking the question of leaders, how are you cultivating the conditions for growth and transformation in your workplaces, in your communities, and even in your life? Because it's one of those sort of nexus decision moments where when you start to look at the world and you're growing soil, everything starts to look different, and it changes the way that you start making your decisions, right? So hopefully that, that packed a lot into a relatively short answer, but that's really what makes it a bit different.
I love it. I love it because I think it's funny because, when I think of what you're talking about, the soil is in a way, when you were talking about it, I was imagining the people and the culture of an organization, right? And if you're cultivating that in the right way, you're going to have results year over year over year, right? You're going to be producing good results if you take care of the conditions, and in my mind, I'm thinking culture and people, but there's probably other elements to it, but that's sort of what I first thought of. And then I think of I spent 22 years in corporate, where I saw a lot of artificial fertilizers being applied just to sort of make the numbers, get the yield, the plants for that season with no thought of next season, right? And no thought of, in the future. And so I really see that where that makes a lot of sense in that I saw a lot of managers who are like, we're just gonna do whatever it can to get the numbers this year, and we're not gonna worry about next year. We're not even thinking about next year. And so what we end up doing is we destroy the soil, we destroy the culture, we destroy the people to where it's no longer sustainable, right? And then usually those managers go on to get fired, and then they bring in a new person to try to figure it out. And so we got a new farmer trying to figure out this dead soil to be able to bring it back to life to try to have some plants in it. Wow, that is really powerful. Wow, it's really interesting. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And well, thank you. I'm glad that it quickly resonates. One of the things that I believe in that we had really advance in our work, we have this saying called story before strategy. And my experience, having done this work in leadership development with folks around the world for well over 2 decades now, is that our conventional stories about leadership and management have worked in some context, and they have also led to the kind of depletion and to sort of run with the metaphor a bit, some of the extraction to where there's very little that can be done. It's like if, I'm sure that there's plots of land in your community where you live where you would never think that you were just going to start growing organically without any chemical inputs or anything tomorrow, right? You'd have to amend it. You'd have to grow because it had been either stripped of all its nutrients or it's been a dumping ground or whatever. Like, you need remediation, right? Before you can talk about regeneration. And my experience is that many of our workplaces, big and small, are very similar.
Mm.
They've developed such strong cultures of extraction and have led people to, whether you want to call it burnout or you want to call it just disaffection or cynicism, whatever it might be. And you really see this a lot in younger people, where um, I I just feel like, and again, like this is a unique vantage point I have from working with people in different parts of the world. People want something different.
Mm.
People want something different. Frankly, it's just about, it's relational. It's about connecting people to something. You're always talk about purpose and your why and all those things, right? In many cases, those are just plants. If your
Yeah.
if your culture is not, if your soil is not amenable for those plants to grow, then I've just given you all these magic seeds that you're planting in that empty lot that has nothing to grow in, right? So that's what's happened too, is that you hear a lot of this conversation about um, new interventions and tools, and who among us has not gone to this workshop or that workshop or had some
Yeah.
consultant doing this training or that training, and then 3 months, 2 months, 6 months later, it's just doesn't take root, and the soil wasn't there. There was nothing there to actually prepare it, right? And so, is that the fault of the plant, or is that us not recognizing that we're actually trying to will something into existence that requires a very different orientation, right? Um, and so it's a metaphor, but it's a metaphor that brings us in, like any good metaphor does. It brings us into conversation about something that's a little more tangible. And the fact that it does resonate. I mean, that you are able to connect to the metaphor so quickly is been one of the remarkable things that, I mean, anywhere around the world, I tell that story, I talk about this. It doesn't matter really where you are in the world, people get it.
Yeah.
And that's a very unique thing, to have that cross-cultural resonance with something so simple as a connection to the soil, right? And the difference between that. Um, that's one of the core aspects of the soil leadership. It's really trying to advance a different story, um, and one that's not just what's the next tool, what's the next
Mhm.
plant, the plant in. It's like no, 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 no. We need to take some steps back. We need to think about remediation before we think about regeneration, just like we would if you and I wanted to go and turn that vacant lot into a thriving local community farm. It's not that it can't be done, but there's a transition. We need to be thinking. And I just think a lot of our workplaces and the way we think about our workplaces, it's very similar.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
It's interesting because so most of my corporate career, I was the guy that went in to turn around struggling manufacturing businesses.
Mm.
So I didn't mean for that to be my career, but that's sort of what ended up happening in my corporate career. So I would go to places that had bad culture, bad performance, and I would have to turn it around. And every time I was faced with the poor soil situation, just like you talk about, I've never, what your perspective is very unique, but it sort of resonates with me really well because what I'd seen is the prior people that were running the business were continuing to plant seeds in poor soil and struggling with low output. Using your analogy, low output from the farm, from the soil. The soil was needed to be regenerated, I think. And so part of what I did was going in there and sort of fixing cultural issues and people issues and some of the things that were not it wasn't about our scrap rate or our production volumes or anything. It was people issues. It was all about culture and people issues. And now that you mention it, it's sort of the soil issue, is the regeneration of like the people of what was really important in the business. And the idea of story before strategy. One of the things that was interesting is that I would always develop a story for the people so they understand where we were headed and why we were heading there. And so to be able to tell a story was really important to be able to get everybody on the same page. So yeah, what you're talking about really resonates. And I see way too many senior leaders trying to put seeds into bad soil or putting, sort of fertilizers and fake things I'll tell you, my last corporate job I was in, the reason I left was we had a really bad apathy in the company. We had very low engagement. And upper management corporate decided they were going to fix it. And they handed everybody buttons. And I was a senior person at this one site. And I had to give out these buttons that came from corporate that said, I love my job. And so that was their fix to the cultural problems we had, was a button that said, I love my job. It's literally the soil was dead and we're going to throw a little bit of fertilizer and hope for the best. And it wasn't going to do anything. And it was at that point I said, it's time for me to leave. I need to go and start my own business because this is frustrating. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a little bit like, I don't know if you or perhaps your listeners, it's like if you go to Home Depot or something and you go to the nursery part of Home Depot and they have these little, 6-pack of flowers that the flowers generally have already bloomed and they're showing their color and so on. And you can take those and you can go and plant those in the front yard or something like that, right? And all of a sudden they look like, oh, everything's blooming and it looks so great, right? But then for most people, after a couple of weeks or something like that, the petals drop and the plants die and they don't do anything. And then what do? You just go back to Home Depot and you get some more of those 6-pack flat and you just put them back in,
Right.
And that's the strategy, right? It's you just replace it. And I'm very careful to not totally disparage that either, because I think in some contexts, like that's the nature of the culture and what it is that whatever it is you're trying to do, that may be what's necessary. But unfortunately, that because it is the conventional paradigm of how you manage and how you create, leadership structures, there's so many other contexts that's not the right approach. And frankly, again, like that's not what people want. And I think that's one of the bits of concern. You asked earlier about sort of what leadership is for. I think part of what leadership is, the necessary part of leadership is to create a new story. And partly to create a new story is because my experience is that people want that. People want to feel connected to what they're doing. People want to feel connected to a greater why of what we're trying to do, even if they don't totally understand all the bits, and their contribution to it is meaningful if they can understand and feel connected, if the soil is there. Right.
Yeah.
And so that again, it's just really trying to introduce a new way of thinking about what it is that you're trying to do so that it can help get you out of the patterns of behavior that may not be advancing toward the kind of culture and workplace that you're trying to create as the leader,
So what do you do? So, it got me thinking about, so how, so many of our listeners maybe they've taken over a department or a plant or maybe even their own, taken over a business. And maybe they look around and they see depleted soil. They see prior management has burned out everything with respect to people, culture, systems, and people are apathetic. They're no longer engaged. And so taking this soil analogy, where should they start in sort of, remediating and regenerating this culture, this soil to be able to produce good fruit again?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Well, I think the first suggestion might be just even understanding that before if you do have the ability to make a decision on whether or not you want to take that position, would be that you understand that going in, right? I think part of this and part of my work is not to be Pollyanna with it and say that you're going to be able to go in and just create magic soil wherever you go, but to recognize the gap between whatever the rhetoric is, because, let's also be real here. Most workplaces are going to be talking about as if they are, to use my metaphor, that they're growing healthy soil, right? That will be the rhetoric that you see or that you hear.
Yeah.
I love my job, right?
People are our number one priority, right? People are our number one asset, right?
That's right.
Okay.
And it's really not the rhetoric that makes people cynical. It's the gap between the reality and the rhetoric that does.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So part of what it is going in is to say, like, okay, what am I walking into? Am I being asked to create a harvest from this soil that is just not possible without all kinds of ridiculous inputs and machinations to make that part? Or is there another way of approaching this that maybe I can, right? And again, the metaphor is there to help you think through what it is that you're doing, rather than think like, oh, I can turn this thing around. Because even though I know that there are people out there that can do those things, but it comes at a cost, right? So that's the first thing, would be just trying to assess the situation, if this is even possible, what you're being asked to do. Number two, just like you would if you were going into plant on something, is almost do a bit of a soil analysis, which is to say, what are you lacking? What are you trying to, number one, what are you trying to do? What are you being asked to do, and what are you trying to do? And work backward from that, right? So, whatever. This is kind of like playing around the metaphors of it, but it's like, if you're being asked to grow strawberries, don't prepare your soil to grow lettuce, like what is it you're trying to grow, and align your approach accordingly, right? So it's that soil analysis. And again, like, what's the story that you're trying to get people to understand, and it sounds very simple, and of course it's very complicated. And add two people, it's just complicated. Never mind if you've got like 200 or something. But I think my experience is that it's more common than not that people kind of get thrown into these things, and they're just kind of flailing around, and like the leaders or the managers, and it's just like, how do I turn this around? I gotta cut costs. I gotta fire these people. I gotta do these things, and that may be right, but without the kind of sense of like, what is it you're trying to plant? And just, take a beat, analyze what's there. And that comes with experience, right? I'm sure that the way you approach that turnaround work in your 10th year was very different than in your first 6 months, right? So so in my work, we advance a lot of work around reflective practice and awareness building, and trying to, again, kind of like get people off the over attachment to this sort of tools based approach to leadership and management, which is necessary and it works, but is limited. It's very limited. And so I think that that's one of the really necessary aspects of what we call in our work, we call it leadership 3.0, which is really this approach that prioritizes reflection and awareness building, something we call social construction, and that also prioritizes well-being as a piece around leadership practice. So anyway, it's really trying to start with that story, though, to help people understand how to align whatever strategies they want to apply to advance that story.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. When you talk about soil analysis, under this analogy, I think about one of the things I've learned over the years that's been effective is, so if I go into a new operation, what I do is I try to talk to as many people as possible, certainly all the key people, but as many people as possible in one-on-one sessions. And I ask 3 questions, and I say, what's going wrong here? What's not working out? What's going well here? Right. So those 2 questions. Then I say, if you were in my shoes, right? If you were the new CEO coming in, or the new plant manager, the new general manager, what would be the first thing you would do? And so I'd ask that question, same question, to every person I met with. And I would keep really good notes, and I would put that together. And to me, a little, maybe it's not perfect analogy, but it's a little bit of a soil analysis of like really what's happened in the past, where the struggles are, where there are opportunities, and then where, it's interesting because one of the things I found over the years is that the ideas always coalesce around about 2 or 3 different really key points. And then as a leader, I take action on those 2 or 3 key points, and then suddenly I'm thought of as a leader that's listening and taking action towards, things that are important. And they're like, how did he know? Well, actually, I asked. I did the soil analysis, right? I actually spent time studying the soil before I, took action. And I think a lot of managers come in and they say, overtime's too high, I'm going to cut overtime. But they don't really do the soil analysis first before they make sort of decisions, right? Does that make any sense?
That makes total sense. So one of the things that I often say that I think applies to both management and leadership is one of the foundational practices is to do your best to understand what's going on
Yeah.
so that you can take best right action.
Yeah.
Knowing that whatever you choose to do is partially informed, may very well be a decision you look back on and you think, oh, that was a wrong decision.
Yes.
Because you're always working with partial information.
Yeah.
But your first task is to do the best of your abilities to figure out what's going on based on your orientation to things, which is what, asking questions and interviewing people is trying to do that. And then coming up with an intervention that may or may not work, but based on what you know and who you are, it's the best right action you can take. And like that, in many ways, like that's what leadership is, right? And so what do you need in order to do that better is you need more perspectives to help you ask better questions.
Yeah.
You need more sort of tools in your box so that when you come to that point of, well, what's best right action, you don't just have like one, form of management technique that you apply in every case, which is I think what a lot of people often do because they, heard or learned or whatever. And sometimes it works, but oftentimes it doesn't. And, again, it behooves you to have more of those tools in the box. But ultimately, the tools in the box don't matter if you don't know how to use them.
Right.
So again, like that,
Yeah.
that's really in many ways the practice of leadership.
I love that. What you talked about is like sometimes you just got to get moving and adjust along the way. And I think that's something sometimes we get, stuck in paralysis by analysis. We spend too much time analyzing things. And I give you a different analogy from a ship standpoint. You can't steer a ship unless it's moving. So I think sometimes we got to get moving and then we steer it, based on the feedback we get and what's working, what's not working. And I think, at least in my experience, we get the ship moving, then we make adjustments. And in a lot of ways, we start building the story. Like here's where we were, here's where we are, and here's where we're going. And I think that's our job as a leader. It's like we put the rudder in the water and we steer the ship, and no one else can do that for us. It's our role and our responsibility to do that. But you can't do that uninformed. You can't just say we're going to put the rudder in the water. We're going like, wait, where are we headed? So I think you have to have that time to. I love the idea of a soil analysis. It's got me thinking a little bit about that. And it takes something to know how bad the soil is. It may be, or there might be areas where the soil is good. Maybe part of the field has been treated well. Like one of the areas I think about in terms of my wife and I talk about is the idea of pockets of excellence. So even in the worst organization, you can find pockets of excellence. You can find where the soil is good and things are going really well. And like, oh, well, can I take that and replicate that in other places in the business?
That's right. That's right. That's right. And to the point of like asking the right questions is that, well, what went into that pocket of excellence being created, right? And it may be too easy to say, oh, it's that person or this technique that happened, but it's often more complicated than that, right?
Yeah.
And again, it comes back to relationships. It comes back to like people investing themselves. All of those things, right? That we know intellectually are what make for healthy, thriving, productive workplaces. And yet, those kinds of pockets of excellence are more few and far between than we probably would, like to admit.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. I think it's going to be the title of my next book is Pockets of Excellence, because I think there's something there where, you can, as a leader, create pockets of excellence even in a bad organization. You can create maybe your own little island of excellence, and then as a leader coming in, how do you find those pockets of excellence and try to replicate? I think there's something there that is going to be curious, because I think at least in my corporate career, I was always creating these little pockets of excellence, even when there was sort of tough things around me. We had a small team that was doing great things, type of thing, and so I think we can build those in different areas in our business. And even if we, control what we can control as a leader, sometimes you can't control everything, but you can control what you can control, in your own sphere of influence. So, well,
Absolutely.
well, Britt, this has been fantastic. I mean, what a great and different perspective that you've given us, and to think about the idea of agriculture and how that affects leadership. Most people are probably saying, wait, that doesn't make any sense. But after talking through it and thinking about it, it makes a lot of sense. It really does. So, what final message would you like to leave with our listeners?
Well, as I briefly mentioned, our my work has really prioritized well-being as a core principle in leadership practice, and has been something that has been very central for the last 15 years, but certainly coming out of COVID even more, with the way people um, talking more about whether it's burnout or mental health, or just many of the ways that COVID sort of really brought to light some of the challenges of working. And it's one of the things that led to the writing of my second book. And of course, this sort of leadership has only been out a year, so it's like it's been up forever either. But really, it's really questioning and interrogating what productivity means to you. And by you, I'm speaking to your listeners.
Yeah.
And you're more than what you produce. And the idea of productivity is, especially in a work environment, and how you use your time and all these things, there's lots of stories about why that is the way it is. And I think that for many people, that story around productivity and that extractive nature of how that conventional productivity story is told, people are wanting something different. And so that's partly why our work has really emphasized this issue of regeneration, and drawing again more on this sustainable practices, because if you burn out and you can't continue doing the work you do, that doesn't help anybody. And and I say that in a corporate, government, civil society, community-based, whatever context that is. And so I think some of that is shifting our story around productivity, and what it means to lead productive teams and so on. And so that's really where our work is centered, and really one of the things that I'm hoping that people will continue to crack open as an idea that needs to be challenged.
I love that. I think one of the benefits that came out of the COVID crisis is that people started thinking about well-being again. And to be honest with you, as a Gen Xer, with the mindset of just work hard, then retire, get the gold watch. That was the way our parents did it. That's the way we do it.
Yeah.
I love the younger generations because they're questioning that stuff.
Absolutely.
Like, why am I doing what I'm doing? Does it have meaning in my life? Does it fulfill me? And I have a lot of 20-year-olds working for me, and I'm learning so much from them as a 58-year-old that I wish I had some of that mindset when I was younger too. So it was always about grind, take care of the company, but you got to take care of yourself too, right?
Sure.
Otherwise the soil just, like we were talking about the soil analogy, it's going to get burnt out. You're not going to be able to grow anything in it. And so I love the idea of personal well-being as well, because if you burn out, we're not going to be great leaders if we can't be there and be there for our people. So, It's a great message. I love that. It's fantastic. Britt, how can our listeners find out more about you and the work that you do?
So the Soil of Leadership has a website, thesoilleadership.org. There you can get the book. You can learn more about my work, my organization. One of my organizations, Perennial, perennial.org. And you can always follow me on Instagram, Facebook, any of the socials as well. And of course, I have the new book coming out early next year Hyaksho way. Would love to be able to get that into people's hands as well.
Fantastic. We're going to put links in the show notes for all of Britt's resources. And if something in this discussion really sparked an interest to you, I highly encourage you to reach out to Britt. We bring experts on the show to expose you to ideas that maybe you haven't thought about. And certainly the idea of, bringing agriculture into leadership is something that is very unique. It's fresh. And Britt can add a lot more insight into it if you have a discussion with him than we could do in just a half hour. So I highly encourage you to follow the links in the show notes or below, either in our YouTube or in the audio here. Look at those show notes, follow the links, and you're going to find out more. And reach out to Britt. He's the expert. He's the one that's going to help you along this journey. So I highly encourage you to do that and pick up The Soil Leadership. You want to have a unique leadership book that you've never read before, you've never thought about. It's not your same old leadership book. This is going to be one from a completely different perspective. And I highly encourage you to think about leadership from different perspectives if you want to be an effective leader. So Britt's got a great book out. I highly encourage you to follow that link that we have and get that book, add it to your reading list, and you're going to be a better leader. So Britt, I want to thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for sharing your unique perspective on leadership. I think we all learned something today, and I really appreciate your time.
No, thank you, John. I had a great time.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again. Well, that is it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.
Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. For more information and updates, please visit our website at johnsrennie.com.
Electricast. Welcome to the Candle Power Hour. Come with us backstage behind the scenes of show business spanning over 4 decades and bringing you the experiences that can only be told by the people who were there.
Our guests are from the A-list, the F-list, and everyone in between. Get set for some of the most insane, hilarious, and inspiring stories you will ever hear.
I'm Mercury.
And I'm Diego.
Your hosts for the Candle Power Hour.
Ever thought about starting your own podcast?
Do you have a business or a message you want to share with the world?
Well, now it's easier than ever with Electricast. Hi, I'm Mark Netter.
And I'm Peter Rafelson. We're the founders of Electricast Media.
Whether you want to start a new podcast or already have one, join Electricast to grow your audience, monetize your content, and build your community.
With our simple sign-up, you get free promotion, world-class analytics, premium ads, and personal support.
Go to electricast.com and join our community today.
Electricast. Transform your influence.
Electricast.